Okay, let's talk about something that is, without a doubt, one of the trickiest parts of our professional lives: feedback. We all know we need it, right? To grow, but actually giving it and even getting it, well, it can be incredibly uncomfortable. So today, we're going to break down how to finally get it right.
And hey, this isn't just a challenge for you and me. When Elon Musk was asked about his single biggest challenge, he didn't say anything about reusable rockets or self-driving cars. Nope. He said it was maintaining a corrective feedback loop. That really puts into perspective just how high the stakes are with this stuff.
So we can all agree that feedback is absolutely crucial. But here's the problem. The way most of us have been taught to deliver it is, well, it's fundamentally broken.
I am almost certain you've heard of this one, the feedback sandwich. You know the drill. You start with a nice piece of praise, then you slide in the tough criticism, and then you wrap it all up with another piece of praise. The intention is good. I get it. We're trying to soften the blow, but it almost never works the way we want it to.
Here's the thing, that crucial piece of criticism, it just gets lost in the fluff. And pretty soon, the praise starts to feel totally fake. And what happens then? Well, anytime you compliment someone, they're just sitting there bracing themselves for the but that they know is coming. This whole approach actually makes praise worthless. There's gotta be a better way.
So what is the solution? Well, there's a framework out there that completely reframes how we think about feedback, moving us away from this idea of criticism and toward genuine, helpful guidance.
And this idea, which Simon Sinek puts so powerfully, is really the core mindset shift we need to make. When you stop thinking of feedback as an attack and start seeing it as a gift, something you give to help someone improve, the entire dynamic changes. It's not about being mean, it's about caring enough to actually be honest. And that brings us to the two pillars of this new approach, which were developed by Kim Scott, a former exec at Google and Apple. See, it's not about choosing between being a nice person and being direct. The real magic happens when you do both. You have to care personally about the people you work with, while also being willing to challenge directly. And here it is, the entire framework laid out. When you care but you don't challenge, you're practicing what's called ruinous empathy. When you challenge but you don't really care, that's just obnoxious aggression. And if you do neither, that's manipulative insincerity. The goal, that sweet spot right in the top right, is radical candor. That's where you're caring personally while challenging directly.
Let's look at a real-world example of what happens when you get this wrong. Take this story about Simon, a salesman who came across as arrogant but was actually just deeply insecure. His manager genuinely liked him as a person, so he kept avoiding the tough conversation about how Simon's whole vibe was alienating clients. The manager was stuck deep in ruinous empathy. And the result? Simon's performance plummeted, and he was eventually fired, completely blindsided by it all.
But let's rewind that story. What if that manager had practiced radical candor instead? In that version, he sits Simon down and gives him direct, caring feedback. He explains the impact his behavior is having, and Simon, finally understanding the issue, immediately changes his approach. His sales numbers soar, his confidence grows, and he ends up winning a Most Improved award. It's the same person, but a totally different outcome, all because of the quality of the feedback.
Okay, so we get the why, that makes sense, but how do we actually do it? Let's get really practical here and look at some simple, effective models for giving feedback the right way.
This is a fantastic little tool called the AIDA model. It keeps your feedback focused and actionable. First, A for action. Describe the specific thing you observed. No vague generalizations. When you did X. Second, I for impact. Explain the effect it had. It made me feel Y, or it caused Z to happen. And finally, D for desired outcome. In the future, I'd love to see you do A instead. Simple, clear, and super direct.
And as you're giving that feedback, here are some key principles to keep in your back pocket. Be humble. Your perspective isn't the only one out there. Be helpful. Remember, the goal is to build someone up, not tear them down. Be immediate. Feedback is way more effective when it's fresh. And deliver it in person. The rule of thumb is criticize in private, praise in public. And finally, make it personalized to the individual, but not personal. It's about their work, not their character.
Of course, giving feedback is only half the battle, right? Learning how to actually receive it without immediately getting defensive is just as crucial for our own growth. I just love this quote from Stephen Covey because it really highlights that receiving feedback well is a true skill. It requires us to put our egos aside for a minute and genuinely listen with the intent to understand, not just to fire back a response.
So how do you do that in the moment? Try the 3R model. First, just receive. That's it. Listen without interrupting or arguing. Your only goal is to understand. Second, reflect. Take a moment, maybe even a whole day, to really think about what was said. And finally, respond. Go back to the person, share what you've understood, and tell them what you plan to do differently. This simple process turns what could be a criticism into a really constructive dialogue.
All right, let's zoom out for a second. This isn't just about a few individual conversations. The ultimate goal here is to build an entire culture where candid feedback is the norm, not this rare, scary exception. And a company that has famously built its massive success on this very idea is Netflix. They call it extraordinary candor, and it's not something they save for the annual review. No, it's part of their everyday work, from the CEO all the way down. They believe it's absolutely essential for staying innovative and competitive.
Now, Netflix uses this really powerful analogy to frame their culture. They don't see themselves as a family, because that can sometimes imply unconditional belonging, no matter what. Instead, they model themselves after a professional sports dream team, where every single player is a top performer in their position, and everyone is constantly working to make each other better.
And look, this isn't just for huge companies like Netflix. Building this kind of culture starts with the leader. You have to be the one to ask for feedback first, to prove that it's safe. You could use an anonymous suggestion box. You could ask a trusted colleague to give you some tough feedback in a team meeting, just to model how to receive it well. You could even do a simple post-it note exercise. The key is to show you're serious about your own growth.
So let's bring this all home. We've talked about why the old way of giving feedback is broken, a new framework to fix it, and how to build a whole culture around it. But you know what? None of it matters without action. So, as we close out, I want you to ask yourself this one question. What is the one conversation, the one piece of feedback, either to give or to ask for, that you've been avoiding? Because having that conversation, it might just be the most important gift you can offer.